Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm having a chai tea with cinnamon and ginger tonight because I'm recording relatively late, because today I'm talking about a very important topic actually, which is planted tank maintenance. This is a very exciting topic for me. I know for some of you it might be annoying to do tank maintenance, but it is very important for your tank. You shouldn't skip it. It's very important for the health of your fish. It's very important for the health of your plants and just for the general look of your tank. I released quite a few videos in the past few months on my channel, but this one is really a hands-on maintenance guide for beginners who want to start a planted tank basically. So I have two planted tanks. The one that you can see in the back here, which is my 240 liter or 63 gallon ecosystem tank, and the smaller 60 liter tank that I keep Neocaridina and guppies. I'm gonna link these videos in the description so you guys can check these tanks out. Before we jump into the video, I know most aquarists or most hobbyists really hate tank maintenance, and I understand it to a certain degree. It's annoying, it's something you have to do, it is added to your daily to-dos, next to work, next to taking care of your family, of your children, whatever. But for me personally, actually I really love tank maintenance. It's something that relaxes me. It's almost something that is like a meditation process for me. And if you enjoy your tea or your coffee with it, whether you do it in the evening or in the morning, it's actually quite a relaxing activity, I would say, that is one of the highlights in my week, I would say. I will try to explain throughout this video how I maintain my natural style dirted tanks, and this is a huge difference if you compare it to like these typically aquascaped tanks. So my tanks don't really need a lot of maintenance, to be honest. I think they would actually survive if I don't feed my fish. If I don't do any maintenance, they would probably survive for years without anything, because it's more or less a self-sustaining ecosystem up until a certain level. However, if you want them to have clean water, if you want your fish to do well, and I mean all of the fish, not only the strong ones that can eat the other ones, you need to feed them. If you feed them, this adds dirt and adds debris, I would say. And for that reason, you need to occasionally, they still don't need a lot of the maintenance, but some maintenance. But this is a huge difference to other styles of keeping fish, I would say. So if you look at channels such as Green Aqua, which was one of the inspirations for this video actually, or some of MD Fish Tank's videos, which is also a great channel, highly recommend watching his videos. They require way more maintenance. Like you need to do weekly water changes or sometimes even daily water changes. You need to do trimming almost every week because they have CO2, they have artificial fertilizers, which all can be great things, but this is not something that I aim for or that I strive for. So this video is actually right for you if you want to get a natural style ecosystem tank, meaning a dirted tank. It has a dirt layer on the bottom that requires very little maintenance and that has only little bioload. So you cannot really apply my cleaning techniques or also cleaning schedule if you have large fish. Like if you had an Oscar, for instance, in this tank, or big catfish, you need to clean it almost every week because they would create so much bioload that they would very quickly get sick if you keep them in there and don't clean it very frequently, meaning weekly. However, I only have a few fish and very small fish in my tanks compared to the size of the water or the mass of the water. So you need to clean them less often. And for me, this makes way more sense and is more animal friendly. But just so you're aware, so if you want to create a, let's say, planted tank for the first time, I think this is the perfect video for you because you will learn how to easily maintain it and enjoy it even more. If you're looking for a fully aquascaped planted tank with weekly or even daily water changes, with CO2, with a skimmer, with weekly trimming, with unnatural fertilizers, etc., you should check out another channel. I link MD Fish Tanks and Green Aqua, for instance, in the description. who do an amazing job with maintaining their tanks this way, but for me it's just too much work, and I personally prefer the more natural style tanks. Before we jump right into the video, it's important to clarify the question why you need maintenance at all. As I said, these are natural style ecosystem tanks. They are supposed to mimic what's going on in nature. However, you need maintenance. And the main reason is because it will help with the biology of the tank. I know the sentence doesn't make a lot of sense from a biological point of view. I'm a bioeconomist myself. However, bear with me for a second. If you don't do the maintenance, algae will grow. You will have an algae bloom. You might also have bacteria, fast growths, and your fish might die. Also, fungi, for instance, can grow in your tank. All of these things are bad and can actually increase the likeliness of your fish getting sick and dying. So you will have a lot of biological problems in your planted tank if you don't do maintenance regularly. And many people say maintenance is not really needed with well-established systems that have like a biological equilibrium. I share that view that you don't really need maintenance, but only in a very, very few cases. Even for my tanks, although I only keep guppies in this tank and one black molly, some corridoras, like these are the largest animals that I have in this 63-gallon, 240-liter ecosystem tank. Even in that case, I need to do regular maintenance because you can already see the water back there gets yellowish. And for me, this is my living room, you know, and I want it to look beautiful so I can enjoy my chai tea with cinnamon here. And for that reason, I just have to maintain it on a regular basis. Sorry. And maintenance actually starts with planning the tank. So it starts way before the setup of the tank. And this is something that maybe is very important if you have not set up your tank yet. It's very basic things. For instance, the way you set up your soil. The tank in the back, I added soil on the ground, like substrate. And I added a huge layer of granulate on top of it as a barrier, so to say, and then just fine white sand on top of it and a lot of it. So there's no way that the dirt basically can permeate through the sand and through the other substrate into the water column, because if that happens, the whole balance, the whole equilibrium is destroyed, and that will lead to a huge algae bloom or maybe also fungi, bacteria growth, and you'd want to prevent that at any cost, because then your aquarium looks very ugly and your fish also get problems. Also, a very simple thing, but sometimes this is overlooked, and I've done this in the past. If you put your tank into your room at a very low point or at a very elevated point, you get problems with cleaning the tank. So you should always look that your tank either is in a way that you can reach into it with your hands while you're seated. This is especially good for small tanks, like anything up to like maybe 100 liters, or what would that be, like 25 gallons. If you have larger tanks, I would advise to put the tank in a way that you can reach into it, and there's no standard solution for this, right? Because you have a different size than I, or a different height, that you can reach into your tank and your armpits are at the same level as the tank. So if you look at my tank here, it's roughly at the height of my armpit. So I can reach easily into it, and I don't have to like bow like this or go like this, because that would be very annoying, to be honest. And you'd want to think about these things beforehand. Some people even add a fine mesh between the substrate, like the soil basically, and the sand. I don't do that because I just add more sand. I have a deep substrate tank, and the substrate is part of the whole maintenance as well. There's beneficial bacteria in the substrate. There's beneficial microfauna in the substrate. Some snails live in the substrate. Like corridoras love digging through the substrate, and the plants of course need it for growing. So you should right from the start, in my opinion, add a deep substrate, because that will save you a lot of maintenance in the end. Let's talk about the 3 types of maintenance that I do here on Edgar's Fish Channel. These are my own classifications, so you won't find them anywhere on the internet. And it's just my own way of doing things here, basically. First type is weekly maintenance. Weekly, sometimes also bi-weekly maintenance. And this is just a quick wipe of algae from the front glass. And actually, I only clean the algae from the front glass. If you clean algae from the front glass, you have a better view into the tank. And for me, that's my goal. Like, I have nothing against algae. Algae is actually quite beneficial for your fish in natural planted tank, because your fish, and especially also your shrimp and your snails, they will love grazing on them. And all of my animals love grazing on algae, so I don't clean the back of my tank. And after some weeks or months, you cannot even see through it anymore. There's such a thick biofilm growing on it, and that's very good. It's exactly as in nature. Also, I don't clean rocks or hardscape surfaces. This is something that pro aquascapers do like on a weekly basis. They scratch off the algae and the biofilm of the rocks, and I would never do that because I want the biofilm to grow on it so my animals can benefit from it and I have a different, so fresh food source for them, right? The second type is monthly maintenance. Monthly maintenance involves trimming plants, cleaning algae again, and of course a water change. I only do a water change once per month, and only roughly 30% of the water is changed in my cleaning schedule. I know aquascapers are going to disagree with that. Please find me in the comments if you disagree. I think it is absolutely sufficient to do it that way. I don't want the water to look crystal clear. For me, a slight yellowish color is totally fine. And I don't want beneficial bacteria to be depleted too fast from my tank. Also, regarding your plants, if your plants don't grow too fast, you won't need to trim them as often, which means there's more time to simply enjoy your tank and instead of constantly cutting them back. Also, this is something interesting to mention: if you get stem plants like Lobelia cardinalis or Hygrophila corymbosa stricta or other stem plants, or for instance Vallisneria plants, they grow extremely fast, and for stem plants, especially if you trim them, they will grow in a way like a tree. So this is something to consider when you trim them back, that they will grow back in a different way, but more on that later. The third type is quarterly maintenance. Like, I do that once every maybe 3 months, 4 months, I would say. And this is when you clean the filter and take care of any other tasks that only need to be done once in a while to keep your planted tank in top shape. For instance, also cleaning the barium light, like the light bulbs. You don't need to clean them that often, but sometimes calcium forms on them and they get a little shady, I would say. So this is also some maintenance I do on a quarterly basis. I'll dive deeper into each of these categories in just a moment now. Nice tea. So let's talk about water change systems. I don't change water that often or that much because, again, I think it's beneficial for the biology of your tank if you don't change it too often. However, if you set up your water change system properly, you'll be able to change the water in a few minutes, maybe half an hour tops, once per month, maybe every other week. If you want to do it more often, that's also okay. I talked about this in a previous live stream with Jorge from Mexicali Fish Keeper. German tap water in my region here, this is the southern region, or the southwest of Germany. I live in Heilbronn, which is in Swabia actually. In that region, the water is quite hard. That means most of my plants and animals that I chose thrive in hard water, or they are indifferent towards hard water. That means I can take just hand warm water basically from the tap and put it straight into my tank. If you have fish or plant that require soft water, that means water with a lower hardness, you need to do maybe an osmosis or reverse osmosis on your tank water or on your tap water before you put it into the tank. This is not the case for my water because I don't want to overcomplicate it and I don't want to spend too much money on that. So I just select animals, and for instance guppies, cories, they don't really care if the water is hard or soft. Neocaridina shrimp and snails usually like hard water, so this works just fine for me basically. At my tanks, I can perform water changes. So just the water changes in about 30 minutes max, I would say. And as for how much of the water I change, the minimum recommendation, and this is just my standard practice, is 30% every month. Now, this is a huge difference to these usually aquascaped unnatural tanks, and I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just a different thing, you know? And when you siphon your water, you always have to watch out for fry. That means juvenile fish, juvenile shrimp, juvenile snails even. And I like to use a trick where I fill up my pipe with some tap water first. Then I create a height difference between the 2 points of the pipe, and then the water just starts flowing. And I like to put my finger on one end of the pipe, so I can always check if there's a baby shrimp, baby guppy very close to the pipe, and then I can stop the flow. You don't need any pump, you don't need any electrical siphoning machine or gadget. It just costs a lot of money, and you just need a piece of pipe, maybe 1 meter long, maybe 2 meters long, depending on the size of your tank, and just siphon the water. It's so easy. There's no tech or anything required here. And please always check. So I use a bucket. I just let the water flow in there, a white bucket. This is beneficial because you can instantly track baby guppies, baby shrimp, and just put them back into your tank, because you don't want to get these small guys flush down the toilet, or even better, if you have the water, just use it to water your houseplants. There's one difference where I do more frequent water changes, but a little bit depending on the tank. When I've newly set up a fish tank, I do a water change to remove ammonia. Ammonia is a molecule basically which builds up from organic decomposition. And of course, at the beginning, you don't have plants that can consume this ammonia or other biological processes that could take care of this ammonia buildup. So after I set up a tank and have a lot of plants in it, they decompose at the beginning because there's some broken leaves and stuff. This creates the ammonia, and I do like a 30 to 50% water change after that day. Usually also the water is a bit murky, I would say, which also helps and keeps it cleaner, or gets it cleaner. Usually when I have a completely newly set up tank, there are no fish in there at that point. During the second week, after setting up a tank, I do another water change, but only 30% this time. So just as the normal water change I do in my monthly routine, so to say. And after that, I do a 30% water change once per month. And that's totally enough. I followed this routine with my home tanks for 15 plus years now, and my fish were always healthy and reproducing like crazy. But I'm curious to hear how you guys are doing it in your tanks. Why don't you go ahead and mention your water change rhythm in the comments? I would be really curious to hear, because this is also something that is highly dependent on the kind of fish you have. If you have a discus tank, if you have a cichlid tank, if you have Oscars, if you have whatever, maybe even turtles or frogs in your tank, or different kinds of crustaceans, or maybe even saltwater tanks, I don't know. I'm sure you're doing it completely different compared to me. And some top-tier aquascapers prefer a completely different approach. For instance, they, for example, change 30 to 40% of the water every 2 to 3 days. And this is, in my opinion, this is crazy. This is definitely something that I personally would never aim to do, because you have to add artificial, that means usually expensive, bacteria, starter cultures to your tank once you did this water change. And you need to do this on a recurring basis. Also, I don't believe this can be good for the biology of your fish and for the health of your fish. But of course it looks great, like, right? It looks like a piece of art basically. To me, this has nothing to do with nature, and I don't really like this way of doing it. But yeah, some people do it. I just wanted to mention it here. And if your water change is simple and efficient, so I just use this pipe and bucket, I'm done in like 30 minutes, you'll be more likely to stick with it. And that's why planning it properly is important, and also planning the tank in advance is very important, as I said. Also, when you refill the tank, you can use the pipe again if it's close to your sink, If not, you can refill it with a bucket. That's how I do it, basically. And I always use a piece of plastic or maybe a piece of hardscape that is in the tank already when I add the water later on, not to stir up too much dirt. And that helps with not creating this, again, nutrient spike and then creating an algae bloom later on. When we talk about the start of your maintenance, basically, I would recommend you to do it either before the lights turn on, so in the morning, or right after they turn off, so at the end of the photosynthesis period. And why? This is because I don't want to disrupt the equilibrium of the tank. I usually turn off the lights when I do maintenance. Plants are disturbed then, and this then changes the equilibrium of CO2 and O2, meaning carbon dioxide and just oxygen, and I don't want to do that. So usually I do it, of course, for YouTube. When I film, I leave the lights on, but usually I would recommend to do it either before the lights are turned off or after. And this is something I actually learned at a video from Green Aqua, which I would also highly recommend you guys to watch. I will link it in the description, because this is honestly some of the greatest quality aquarium videos that are out there. I often use them as inspiration, and I would just recommend you to watch their channel, maybe subscribe. In my case, every maintenance session starts with a general assessment of the planted tank. I always follow like a checklist in my head at the beginning, which could be beneficial for you as well. So I check the temperature, but I don't use a thermometer, I just check it with my hands. If anything is off, I can adjust, especially in the summer. It gets very hot in Germany and there can be huge differences in the temperature. I also check the filter power, and this is something that you can just observe by, in my case, the Vallisneria leaves. The Vallisneria leaves, they float in the current, like in a river. Sometimes they don't. And if they don't, there's usually something wrong with the filter. And this is most of the time the intake of the filter that's clogged, and then I have to declog it. Very simple, very straightforward. And by watching my tank daily, I can tell when the filter is getting clogged and needs cleaning, basically. And I also assess the overall plant condition and growth. For example, if I last trimmed plants 1 month ago, but they haven't grown as fast as I expected, could indicate like a fertilization issue. That means that their roots maybe don't reach the nutrient-rich layer of the soil. Then I can do adjustments and put them deeper into the soil, for instance. Or there's an issue with the lights, i.e. the lights might be blocked. So maybe there's too much immersive frogbite, too much Vallisneria, too many other plants blocking the surface of the water. And then the plants that don't grow up until the surface level, like the cryptocorynes or the Lobelia cardinalis plants, or also the Java moss, they don't get as much sun or aquarium light as they would usually require, and then they just don't grow. And then I can adjust this in my maintenance process later. Next, I scan the tank for algae. So there's different kind of algae, of course, but you should always identify or try to identify where it is. And I like to remove it with my hand. And in this tank in the back, I had a huge filamentous algae growth problem over the last few months, basically. Now it's in control because the tank reaches more and more of an equilibrium. That means that the biological processes have adjusted to each other, basically, and a kind of ecosystem is forming and an equilibrium in this ecosystem. Now all of the other plants take up so many nutrients, or so much of the nutrients out of the water, that algae have a harder time growing. Nutrients and light, of course. Times are also another important thing that you should check. So I use timers, analog timers. These analog timers sometimes have the weird tendency to change. And then your lights, for instance, go on during the night or during the morning way too early. Also during summer and winter time, this is something that you should adjust. And this is something where you should just quickly check if they are set correctly. And finally, I take a good look at the fish and their overall condition, I would say. So, for instance, my Corydoras, they looked a little underfed in the last few weeks. So I got like a new tap for them, like a new food, and feed them more often now. And this is just something that you should regularly do. Sorry friends, I just had to eat like a bit of chocolate because I didn't have dinner yet, so I needed to get some sugars in before continuing. So before starting the water change, of course you need to bring the hoses or the pipes. I use just simple pipes. There's no technical stuff that you need for that. You don't need a pump or anything. With the technique I explained before, super easy to siphon your tank, and I use one that is a little larger for the larger tank and a smaller one for the smaller tank, and both of them cost like 2-3 euros or $2 or $3 US. It's dirt cheap. Once you siphon the water, what can you do with the water? The best thing is actually to use it to water your houseplants. Like you can see all of these plants here. I also love plants. This is the best fertilizer for your houseplants basically. Also for your garden. And next I grab my maintenance kit that holds all of the necessary tools. Let me get it quickly. In my maintenance kit I have like different small tools. I think they don't cost that much. So this is actually a chopstick for eating. I don't know how this got in there. So basically I use tweezers to get plants out and reinsert them. I have different kinds of tweezers because this kind of tweezer you can, for instance, go on the side of the tank and grab some plants. This is very beneficial. This tweezer is for larger plants, which is also beneficial. I have this rake that I use to usually scratch off some snails before I clean the glass. And I have this kind of scissor. And this scissor, this is really a lifesaver. It is slightly woven, you can see, so you can go to the ground of the tank and get plants off, and it's very long. I also have a normal kind of scissor, but this normal scissor is way less comfortable compared to this scissor. And there's like a whole industry of aquarium scissors. For me, those are super sufficient. They work fine, and they are also relatively cheap on Amazon, I think. One more tool is like a toothbrush that I use for cleaning the edges of the glass. And also sometimes when there's dirt on the filter, for instance, I use the toothbrush. And this is like super cheap again. You don't need any specific aquarium toothbrush for sure. Also, before cleaning, I just put an old towel in front of the tank. When I clean the tank here in the living room, I always do it because my fiance doesn't like when the floor gets wet, which is understandable. In my room, sometimes I don't do it because it's not that critical that it's super clean all the time. But yeah, in the living area, I like to do it, or I prefer to do it to just put like an old cloth or an old, how to say, towel, so you don't have a whole mess around in the floor. Because also you step through the water, you bring the old water to your plants in your room and pour it in there, and then your whole place gets all wet. So this is just a little thing to remember. Before you siphon any of the water out of your tank, it's important to stop the filter and the skimmer if you have one. In my case, or in my tank, I have both in one product, so to say. The tank that I bought in one whole set from Juwel has an inbuilt filter, and this filter comes with a skimmer. The skimmer is basically a little pump that removes floating plants basically. And I make sure to turn off like also any heater. And if you have like a CO2 bottle that is connected to your tank, you should also turn that off, or maybe UV light. I don't have that, but I have a heater. I usually also turn off them or the heaters, because basically they can get damaged if they heat air. Basically, if they're not submerged underwater, they can get damaged, and you want to prevent that, right? So finally, after a lot of steps, I'm ready to start the actual maintenance process. The first step is, especially in smaller tanks, to remove a little bit of water from the tank. And the reason why I do this is, if the tank is completely full and I reach in, the water will spill over the edges and so you will always have a little bit of a dirty ground. So I always lower the level slightly first, and then I can work with my hands in the tank basically. Next, I scrape the algae from the glass, and I use this tool, this rake here, to get rid of snails first, and then I take either my JBL Flow T2, which is like a small floating magnet, cleaning magnet, or I use razor blades, just plain razor blades that I got originally for another purpose for my lawn mowing robot, but it's just cheaper. And now the lights turned off actually. I will turn them on for a second. Usually I wouldn't do this, but just to record the video, I'll leave the light on for another few minutes. And that tells you that it's already 9:20 in the evening when I'm recording this on a Saturday, because yeah, I have no parties that I go to, because my main hobby is aquariums and making videos about aquariums. I always take extra care when using razor blades close to the edge of the aquarium. This is where my toothbrush comes in, quite handy, which you can use for the edges of your tank, because you don't want the glue to be scratched by your razor blades, because that could actually lead to a leak in your tank, and then you get a huge problem, because then actually the whole tank can empty itself. And this happened to me once 10 years, maybe 12 years back, and then you have to be very quick and remove all of the water from the tank, which I cannot recommend. So be careful with razor blades that are going close to the edge. Just use your toothbrush and everything will be fine. I also always take extra care when going with my cleaning magnet close to the sand, because if small sand particles are trapped between the two magnets and the glass of your tank, actually you can get small micro scratches into your glass, and you won't see them at the beginning, but algae and other like microorganisms like bacteria will grow in them, and then this looks really ugly over the time. So I think with that I've covered all of my basic steps. Now it's time for the trimming. And for me, this is actually the most enjoyable part of maintenance, and I think it's for most of the aquarists, because you are like a little gardener in your planted tank, and if you have plants that grow fast, this is something that you have to do often, but for me it's a very enjoyable process, I would say. I always start with trimming the foreground, and I do this right at the beginning. So usually I trim those plants first, see what's behind, and usually you should choose plants, and this is what I said at the beginning with planning beforehand. You should choose plants that are growing not as large in the foreground, so they don't block your view into the back of your tank. And I didn't do that in that tank that effectively, I must say, because you can see this giant Vallisneria on the side that actually looks quite cool, but it blocks, of course, the whole view into the back of the tank. The tank then just visually appears to be smaller, although it isn't, and it's great for the fish, but not as good for you as a viewer, I would say. Anyways, trimming. I start with trimming the plants in the front, and then I slowly move to the back of the tank. One more important thing when trimming your plants is the top-off trimming technique, basically, which means that when you have stem plants, so for instance Lobelia cardinales or Hycophila corymbosas, you can cut them above their stem basically, and then you can just reinsert the top back into your tank, and this actually then grows very fast. It will create roots and then will grow pretty quickly, and looks also more healthy usually than the old stem plant. And this is if you have a new planted tank set up, you can actually use this to really plant it very quickly without buying so many plants up front. This then saves a lot of money for you. The next step is basically vacuuming the substrate, or siphoning the substrate, and this is both water change as well as just getting the sand or the substrate clean. A common question that I get from my friends is how often I clean my tank and also how I clean the substrate. And in planted tanks, the the soil, that the soil of the tank doesn't really need deep cleaning or deep vacuuming. So maybe I'll do clean from time to time the front glass or the soil right next to the front glass or right behind the front glass, because it looks a little dirty. This is actually good, but I don't want it there just for the pure aesthetics of it. And then what I do, I just vacuum it from the front section from time to time. But this is something that I do maybe every quarter, basically. And another trick that I like to use is just use fresh sand to top off the old sand. Like, always try to buy a little more sand than you actually need for your tank, so you can remove some of the old sand and just top it off with fresh sand. And this will work like magic to your tank, trust me. As I said earlier in the video, there's also some occasional maintenance tasks that you don't need to do, or that I don't do as often. And the biggest occasional task is filter maintenance, basically. Yeah, but you don't need to really worry about that if you are a total beginner. It's quick and easy, and it depends really highly on the quality of your filter. I use this filter that's provided by Juwel that is built into the tank, but I've also used numerous other filters from JBL, from Eheim, from many different brands. And I think you should really invest a little more money there, because filter maintenance is important. If you have a cheap product, it will annoy you over time. And maybe read the user's manual of the original equipment manufacturer from your filter once or twice before doing filter maintenance, or watch a YouTube video about it. Otherwise, you could break like a small part in your filter that then destroys the whole thing. And sometimes it's difficult to get replacement parts, except if you go to like a really premium brand. In most cases, if you have like a filter like I have here, you can just take out the filter sponges basically and rinse them in aquarium water. I don't like to use tap water because it actually hurts the bacteria in the filter, and the bacteria are so numerous in your filter sponge and extremely important for the biology of your fish and of your plants, so you shouldn't stress them too much. And this is why you should also not clean the filter too often. So there is a too often when it comes to aquarium cleaning. It's not the same as with your room or with your house. You can do a full filter cleaning, maybe I would say every 3 months in a natural style aquarium. And for larger ones, you can even do it less often. So if you have a really large tank, you can even clean the filter less often. I know this is controversial, like many people will disagree with me, and please do so. If you have other fish than I do, you can mention it in the comments. But this is something that I do like maybe every 3 months. And then I also don't like to buy new sponges. At least you have different sponge layers always in the filter, right? And I don't like to purchase new sponges all at once and then put them into the filter. I like to do this gradually, like one sponge exchange at one time. And with that, you also have like this bacteria that then are in the one sponge and can permeate to the other sponge. Then you have maybe other maintenance tasks depending on your tech setup that you have at your aquarium. So sometimes you have pipes and hoses that you have to clean. Like sometimes the pipes get dirty, like this pipe here. Yeah, this is a fungus that grows in them. You can use these pipe cleaners to simply get rid of it. A skimmer. Skimmers sometimes need to be cleaned daily. I have this skimmer / filter in my tank here. I almost need to declog it daily. It's very annoying. Things that I don't do, but that might be necessary if you do them, is the CO2 bottle replacement. If you use a CO2 bottle, I've never done that, and I will probably never do it. You have to replace it like every 6 to 8 months, depending on how much you use it. Some people have drop checker solutions. Some people have protein skimmers if they have saltwater tanks. Some people put root sticks into their tanks. I don't do all of that stuff, but just be aware, depending on your tech setup, it might differ a little bit. And please use this video here to discuss your setups in the comments and your cleaning routines. Once your maintenance is done, this is very important, double check the tank and ensure if everything is running smoothly. There's some like post-maintenance tasks that I do, like I do them in my head. but maybe it does make sense to provide like a short overview for you guys as well, especially if you are new to the hobby. Once the whole tank is refilled with water, you can start the skimmer again, and you can start your heater again, you can turn on the lights again if they were turned off, or they will automatically turn on if you have like this timer, and you can turn on the heater and the pump basically, or the filter. In my case, there's no need to remineralize water, for instance. You don't need to add any like Aquascaped, or I don't want to say that it's bad, but I don't do it. Like, I remove so little of the water that I don't need to add any biological cultures that I purchase from the pet store. However, what I do clean the outside of the glass. I use just normal glass detergent basically, spray it on the glass and then clean it. Extremely important, and I can't stress this too much, not to put any chemicals into the tank because your fish will die instantly. I have like a checklist, and I'll just run quickly through it. So I just check the tank if it generally looks as it always looks. I look at the foreground if there's a lot of gravel, like in this tank for instance, there's a lot of substrate balls basically on the sand. I try to remove it, of course. I try to not have too many floating leaves because they will clog the skimmer. It's very annoying. I will try to have no loose plants. This also sometimes happens, and you can only see it afterwards. I check if all the algae is gone, because especially if the water is stirred up, there's a lot of nutrients in the tank, and your algae will have an easy time growing. So try to get as much algae as possible. Of course, I'd look if the trimming of the plants looks appealing to me. I also check if the glass is clean on the inside and on the outside, and if not, I can use my toothbrush to take care of it a little bit. Also, I like to keep my equipment clean after cleaning the tank so it doesn't rust. I think it's stainless, but still, I like to keep it clean. I want to check if the filter is working properly, if there's any weird sound in the filter. And there's actually a weird sound at the moment. I will show you in a second. Something is clogged. I check if the filter, heater and light are plugged back in, if the timers are okay and set properly in this auto mode basically. I check if I have an outside filter, if the hose joints are secure and not leaking basically, and that there's no water on the floor. This is especially important if you live together with your wife or your fiancé or your girlfriend, to prevent any stressful situations there. And I check if the temperature is okay. I don't use a thermometer again, I just use my hand. And with that, I have like this post-maintenance checklist that I always go through, and I don't go through a checklist and check it. It's just like a checklist that I go through in my head. I would say that basically wraps up this aquarium maintenance guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Edgar's Fish channel. Hit the like button and consider watching this video here, where I add Neocaridina and Amano shrimp to my 240 liter 63 gallon ecosystem tank here. I will link it here on the top left of this video, and if you want to see something more recent, you can also click here on this video and enjoy this video. So see you in the next one.